Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter right now. You don't have too much time left, so check it out. It is called Endure the Stars, and it's from the company Grimlord Games. Now, first and foremost, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, please go to the Kickstarter project page. There's going to be a link down in the description section below this video, and then if you click on the little icon that's a pull-down card, I know those are a new thing on YouTube, but you click on the little icon, it looks like an eye up in the top corner, that will pull down a little bar that will have the link to the Kickstarter project page. Go there and you can find out much more information and see all kinds of cool stretch goals and things, more than I could possibly tell you about here, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project. Now, what is Endure the Stars? This is a fully cooperative, scenario-driven game. It takes place in the future. You and the other players are the surviving crew members of a derelict ship where they were trying to colonize a planet, and in order to do that, to help facilitate that, they were, in better days, experimenting with genetically modified creatures in order to help them with that process. And, of course, all of them went crazy. The creatures just went mad and rampaged across the ship and started killing everyone on the ship. Now, fast forward to the future from that time, and the last survivors of the crew are desperately trying to survive, trying to band together to put off some sort of resistance to fight back against the creatures, and you have to meet certain objectives through different scenarios. Each player takes control of a different character, like a psychic or the captain or the engineer, so on and so forth, and you try to work together using your special abilities, powers, and items that you find to the best of your advantage to try to make it through another day. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is going to play with a print-and-play version of the game. So, definitely take that with a grain of salt. It's something I had to hastily put together in order to meet the deadline for to get this up in time for the end of the Kickstarter. So it's definitely not anywhere near what the final version of the game is going to look like. The final version of the game is going to have really fancy miniatures for all the enemies and for the characters, nice cardboard tiles for all the different scenario tiles, and then fancy cards, all types of different things. This is strictly just to give you a taste of what the gameplay is like, and only one scenario at that, not even the many scenarios that are going to come in the final version. So let's take a look at that, then we're going to come back, I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Endure the Stars. I want to stress again that this is a print-and-play version of the game. And also I need to note that this is a cooperative game where everyone is working together towards the same objective. Now, this is also a campaign and scenario-driven game, which means that you're going to have different types of goals and objectives depending on what you choose to do. Now, in this particular case, we have to get to the medics facility in order to get the objective, to get the medicine. Now, that means that we're going to use these particular tiles in the game in this particular setup. The final version of the rulebook will have all these different suggestions and campaign scenarios and things like that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and use this one. We have, in place of miniatures, we have standees. So our 3 character standees are in their starting position, and each character has their own dashboard. So you have the medic. And you also get an item as well. So the medic starts off with the swarmer leg. The engineer starts off with a pistol. And the psychic is going to start off with a plasma cutter. Now, depending on the scenario, this might be a random item or weapon, or it might just be deterministic. It all depends on the scenario. Out on the board, we also have these radar tokens. The radar tokens are keyed into the enemies, and they are bad. If an enemy's radar token is alerted to your presence, that means it's going to spawn enemies, and you want to avoid that if you can. So let's go ahead and take a look at those enemies. Like I said, these are just for the print and play version, they are just standees. But you have 3 main types of enemies at this point in the game's development. First off, you have these smaller little guys over here. Oh, look at those little guys. I didn't mean to say it that way, but those are called the swarmers. And each of the different types of enemies is going to have different stats, different strengths and weaknesses, things that make them potentially better or worse than the other enemies and then your own characters. For instance, the swarmers are very fast. They can perform 3 actions per turn. and one of those being an attack action, and they can deal damage for every successful attack. Now, the bigger ones back here, kind of gorilla-looking ones, are called Jaegers. They're a little bit slower, but they deal more damage. They require 2 damage to be killed, which can be pretty rough, and they can perform 2 actions per turn, but they deal 2 damage per attack, so that's really bad. Then this one big one up front is called the Titan. The Titan is way different than any of the other enemies. He's incredibly more difficult, and it's so difficult, in fact, that he has his own dashboard, the same way that the players do, that you keep track of his health and damage on. And then he also has his own deck, signifying the types of attacks and maneuvers that he does. There's attack cards and mood cards, and you'll have to use those. Now, he's not going to be used in this scenario, but just something to bear in mind. I wanted to mention that because it's kind of a cool thing, because it feels like the Nemesis from the Resident Evil games. Now, I mentioned that every scenario is going to have a specific objective. In this case, the objective is an actual objective token that the medic must get to right here. Okay? So the medic has to get to this objective token, but you'll notice that around that it's swarming with these radar tokens, signifying enemies that are going to spawn. Nevertheless, as the medic, you must get to that token, and then you must get to the exit, which is this little doorway token that I have over here on the side of the board. So get the objective and get out. Other scenarios might be more complicated or even more straightforward. It just depends on the objectives of the scenario. Now let's take a closer look at our little action dashboards here, just to break down what your character can do. Well, first off, you have health and resolve. Those are your 2 main stats in the game. Obviously, if you lose too much health, you're going to die, and if all players die, that's the end of the scenario. So you don't want that to happen. In this particular case, you definitely don't want the medic to die either. But you also have resolve. Now, resolve is a separate type of thing, a separate type of, let's say, resource that may be depleted as the game wears on. Several different things are going to cause you to lose resolve. Whenever one of the enemies comes into your line of sight, whenever a special card tells you to, or when another survivor dies in front of you. Now, this is thematically representing just the total stress that all of these characters are under from being on this derelict ship that's overrun by these genetically modified monsters. So you can understand that that might take a toll on a person's mental well-being. So if you lose all 10 of your resolve, then you could essentially just start to go crazy. You unravel, your actions become unpredictable, and so on. Now over here, every character has different special abilities that they can take advantage of. They're going to have active abilities that are always on, passive abilities, and abilities that are going to require special actions to use as well on their turn. So for instance, the engineer has his power suit, which is going to give him +1 to all of his melee damage. He has the Making It Last ability, which gives him an additional use of certain items, and so on and so forth. Then we'll go ahead and take a look at weapons. Now, this is a pistol. Just bear in mind, this is a print and play, so there's another card from something else entirely behind here. But there's 4 different types of stats that you're going to have to pay attention to on weapons, and in particular on ranged weapons. So for instance, on the first number here is the actual range of the weapon. This is a pistol, so it can go 0 to 1 zones. Then you have the amount of dice that you get to roll for that weapon. Then the accuracy of the weapon, which means how much, or what you have to roll on that die or dice, as the case may be, in order to qualify as a hit. And then finally, the noise that you generate. In this game, pretty much a lot of the stuff that you do in the game is going to generate noise. Whenever you're forced to generate noise, you're going to have to put out one of these noise tokens of the appropriate number, which means it's more likely that the enemies are going to find you. So let me just break down what the characters can do on their turns. This is probably the easiest way to explain at least the gist of the game. First and foremost, one character is going to be designated as the first player, so we're going to go ahead and say that that's the medic. Now, every character is going to have 3 actions they can do on their turn. They're like action points that they can spend to fuel a variety of different actions. One of them is just moving. You move across the board 1 zone at a time. Note the dotted lines there delineating the different zones. So if I'm the medic, I can actually use all of my actions just to move. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to move past there because there's a radar token there, and that's going to spawn some enemies. So maybe I want to go this way around to try and avoid all of that. You can't move through solid walls, obviously. You can try and move out of spaces where enemies are, but you're going to have to roll a d6 to see if you can escape. If it's lower than your resolve, then you can go ahead and get out of there. The next type of action you have is attacking, which is a whole other set of rules, so we're going to go ahead and get back to that and just rattle off the rest of the different types of actions you can do. One of the things you can do is search. So obviously this was a huge derelict ship. There are a lot of items that are left behind by other survivors who are no longer surviving. And you want to try and find those in order to make use of them. Assuming you're in a room that does not have a hostile enemy in it, you can actually attempt to do a search and you can draw the top card off of the item deck and make use of it. So this is actually a Daybringer helmet. And there's a lot of different items in the game. I'm not going to show you every single one, but just to give you an idea, you have monolith armor, so you can find some armor to give you bonuses, different types of helmets, there are med kits, and so on and so forth. The rest of the actions are very conditional, and you may or may not use them. Sometimes you have to interact with the environment, flip a switch, open a door that's stuck, some things like that. Sometimes you want to activate your own abilities, the abilities you have on your character dashboard that require you to use an action. You can use them as part of your action phase. You can trade with other players who are in your area, and also you can intentionally make noise. You can stomp up and down or do something in order to try and draw the enemy towards you, which is something you might want to do for specific tactical reasons. Now, once all of the players have taken their actions for the round, now it is time for the GEPs phase. This is where the enemies get to do their stuff. And this is at this point I'm going to mention as well that the way that these tokens get flipped over is if at any point one of the characters is within line of sight to one of those tokens. Doesn't matter if they're just about to move out of it. As soon as they hit line of sight to one of those tokens, it's going to spawn. Now, in the final version of the game, on the other side of these tokens, there will actually be little symbols signifying, little pictures telling you what type of enemy is about to spawn and a number telling you how many of them there are, or it could be the Titan, which you really don't want to happen. Let's say in this case, just to keep it simple, we're going to say like 3 of the swarmers have spawned. Now, when you get to the GEP phase, for any enemies that are still in, let's say, token form, those, and they haven't been alerted to the presence of the characters, they just roll in a random direction. So in the full game, you're going to have a directional die that you use, and you'll roll that die to determine which direction these radar tokens are going to randomly move. But that's only if they haven't been alerted to the enemies, to the character's presence, or they haven't been flipped over into their actual spawning creatures. Now, what will alert the enemies are several different things in order. First off, if there's any kind of items that are distracting them, if they've seen a survivor, if they hear a noise, they're going to move towards that deterministically. Now, of course, there's no reason the medic would have left himself out here like this, but let's say that he did. Well, of course, the enemies are going to move towards him because that's their targeting priority. Now, we're going to get back to combat in a second. Like I said, that is the most complicated part of the game, and it's not that bad. But next, after you get done with the GEP phase and everything that could possibly mean, then you go into the resolution phase. The resolution phase is you get rid of any non-relevant tokens and things from the board, and then you have to draw a card from the event deck. The event deck is going to have some type of random effect on the current state of the game. So, for instance, the artificial gravity might fail, the life support systems might fail, in which case every living organism is going to take a damage. It might be that the radar token, new radar tokens spawn. Lots of different things could happen. Usually going to be bad, potentially in some way, shape, or form for the crew. Now, combat. It's actually rather simple. So basically, if it's your turn and you want to attack the enemy, it's just spending an action and looking at the different stats on the weapon you're trying to use. So for instance, if I was using the pistol, I'd look at the range, make sure a character is within range, 0 or 1 in this particular case, look at how many dice I get to roll, look what I need to roll on the die in order to get a successful hit, and also take into account the fact that I may be making a lot of noise by doing so. When the enemies get to attack, and remember that the enemies have actions the same way that the characters do, it's just that they're more deterministic. So for instance, if a Jaeger comes up and attacks, it's just automatically going to deal 2 damage, which can potentially be blocked by the characters if they have armor. So another type of special die that comes in the game is the a body die that will tell you where the enemy is going to hit you. If it hits an armor spot, then you're successfully protected. If it doesn't, it might mean that you either just take damage or a specific body part is injured. Hence the reason that you have these different areas of your body that are marked with those little indicators there, because specific parts of your body can get damaged, and that can mean different things for you. Last thing I'll just reiterate is how bad the Titan is. If the Titan were to come out in a scenario, he would come onto the board, and then when it's his turn to attack, you'd actually shuffle up these cards and draw from them. And there's two different types of cards. There's attack cards and mood cards. Mood cards are going to stay in play until another one comes out to replace it and give the Titan some sort of extra special ability, which might be it's harder to hit him. It might be that he deals more damage with his attacks and so on. And then his attack cards are obviously going to dictate what type of attacks he does for the rounds and what they do, like what kind of damage and things that they do. And as you can tell, they are very difficult to take out. They have a lot of health, and you definitely do not want to fight one if you can avoid it. And that is pretty much a general overview of Endure. It's, there's a lot more to the game. There's more scenarios. There's more different types of setups you can do. There will be more characters in the game. And of course, I have to reiterate that the final version of the game is going to have fancy miniatures, really thick cardboard tiles, and nice card stocks, all of these different things. But hopefully, this gives you an idea of what you can expect from the game. It is fully cooperative, campaign and scenario driven, trying to work together to fight through hordes of monsters and meet your objectives, and of course, try to stay alive. That is Endure the Stars. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. I find the concept of Endure very fascinating because there are a lot of cooperative games out there, and it does seem like scenario-driven games, campaign-style games, are becoming more and more popular. But surprisingly, there is a real lack of games that are hard science fiction, almost survival horror is what this game feels like a lot of the time. And with this kind of tone and tenor to it, I think Endure the Stars has really carved itself out a niche. There's not a lot of games that look like this, feel like this, have the same type of elements to them, while at the same time, it is inspired by games that use like heavily cooperative elements and these scenario-driven elements and puts them together into something new. So it's learning from those games, making something new and fresh out of them while still having a solid mechanism and engine underneath it to keep it running. There's a lot of really interesting elements here. The fact that you have the enemies that are not necessarily on the map yet. They're just like, okay, we're looking at our motion detectors. We see that they're out there. This is akin to the Alien movies, and that's why it gives us sort of a survival horror type feel. But also the classic game Space Hulk has the same type of like radars and blips and things like that. But this does it in a really interesting way because it could spawn different types of enemies, and it could spawn like a ton of enemies all at once, and the Titan could be rampaging all around. You just don't know because it only looks like a blip to you until you come across it. And you really don't want to do that if you can avoid it. You can just try to evade the enemies, meet your objectives, like in the one I showed you there. It's just get to the med bay and get your objective item and get out as quickly as possible. You want to try and do that, but sometimes combat is unavoidable, and luckily in those instances, hopefully, you've been searching around. You find a lot of really cool items like body armor and guns and shotguns and helmets. You all have different special abilities. The Psychic has her own types of special abilities she can use, so everyone feels different and distinct from each other. Just hopefully you don't ever have to use those abilities. But when you do, they are there for you. It's really interesting, too, because it would have been enough just to say, oh, hey, if you take damage, you're going to die. And then that's really, really bad, of course. But now you have the whole thing with the resolve and having to make sure that that's up so that you don't start, fraying at the edges and going crazy. But also it's going to be important for solving any kind of test that relies on your resolve. So you have different types of things that you have to juggle. It's not just, I don't want to get hit. It's also, I need to make sure that I don't become incredibly stressed out as well. So that's, again, lending the game its sort of survival horror type idea and theme as well, on top of the fully cooperative hard science fiction elements, which makes it a very interesting beast at that. And the fact that you have all these different scenarios, it can be customizable, you potentially make your own scenarios, and there's all kinds of stretch goals and things that have been unlocked and will be unlocked during the course of the game to add even more content to it. So definitely what you saw there in that overview, barely the tip of the iceberg. And if you want to find out more about the game, definitely go to the Kickstarter project page. You don't have to take my word for it. You can find out for yourself. Go there. I'll have a link down underneath the video and also in the top corner of your screen. You can click on that icon. That will pull down a link that will take you to the page. Find out more information and hopefully consider backing Endure the Stars from Grimlord Games. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.